Namaste. Welcome, everyone, to the August edition of Hindus for Human Rights Baithaks for Liberation series. Our Baithaks are a special space to push back against caste supremacy, religious nationalism, and exclusionary gatekeeping, and to ask what a Hinduism rooted in love, solidarity, and justice actually looks like in practice. Reclaiming our tradition means recognizing that our liberation is bound up with everyone else's. That is why our commitment to an anti-caste Hinduism naturally leads us into deep interfaith solidarity. When our spiritual practices meet across communities and even go on to mingle, faith stops being an instrument of division and becomes a powerful engine for collective freedom. Today's dialogue looks at what happens when we tear down the artificial walls between sacred lineages and stand together against shared systems of oppression. We are honored to be joined by two remarkable leaders. Punya Upadhyaya is a co-founder and board member of Hindus for Human Rights. Shaped by years spent at his gurus and Baba's ashrams, he views devotion, music, and spiritual practice as vital forces for community renewal and social transformation. Professionally, he consults with Fortune 500 corporations, Native American nations, academic institutions, and nonprofits worldwide on organizational culture and leadership. Nikesha Breeze is an internationally acclaimed interdisciplinary artist based in Taos, New Mexico, working in bronze and clay sculpture, painting, performance, and immersive installation. An African-American descendant of the Mende people of Sierra Leone and Assyrian American immigrants from Iran, their work engages African diasporic memory, ancestral reclamation, and public memorialization, including commissions for the Equal Justice Initiative's Freedom Monument Sculpture Park, Yale University, and the Biennale of Sydney. A devoted follower of Neem Karoli Baba, Breeze is an active member of the Taos Hanuman Mandir community, where they regularly lead kirtan and arti. Both Punya and Nikesha call the high desert of Taos their spiritual home, and I too have come to call Taos my second home. All three of us are in fact speaking to you from Taos. I know Punya and Nikesha from the Taos Hanuman Ashram, where they are both devotees and leaders. For 2 decades, I have been worshiping at the Taos Hanuman Ashram, and on any given Saturday or Sunday, any devotee will see Punya greeting guests, welcoming them to come close and offer their prayers to Hanumanji, touch him, touch his feet. And they will often see Nikesha leading the chanting of the Hanuman Chalisa and then leading Arti. Since we are gathered at a Hindus for Human Rights Liberation Baithak, it's very special for us to remember that our organization was founded right here in Taos, and our initial conversations took place at the ashram. Punya and Nikesha will have a conversation about their own personal connections to the ashram, what role the ashram and Babaji plays in their lives, and also how their rootedness in the ashram community shapes their involvement in other spaces, other communities, and struggles. Many of you will know that Hindus for Human Rights has, since our inception, insisted on connecting our work as Hindus to counter Hindutva and refuse caste, and also connecting to the civil rights movement in this country. We talked a lot in our last Baithak with Rabbi Margot Meitner and Reverend Mark Thompson about how foundational and grounding our repeated pilgrimages to Selma for the bridge crossing jubilee has been. A wonderful coincidence today is that Nikesha's powerful art also connects to Selma and Montgomery. When I think of Nikesha and Punya and what they embody, it is the absolute openness we aspire to in Hindus for Human Rights. They defy the walls that seek to divide us through their being and everything they do. I'll now hand it over to Punya and Nikesha to lead us into conversation. As always, the panelists' views are their own and do not reflect official positions of Hindus for Human Rights. Handing it over to Punya.
Thank you so much, Sunita. It's so lovely to be here once again at the Baithaks. I love these spaces because I think the Baithaks are a more intimate space for conversation. And I'm so delighted that Nikesha can join us today and be part of this because, like you said, one of the first places we went to after we started founding this was we went to Baba and Hanumanji for blessings for Hindus for Human Rights, that we do the right work and we do it in the right ways. As we start, let us just take a moment and do three ohms, and then we'll go into the conversation so that we can be here together, both with our brains and our hearts, but also with our souls. Om. 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 Oh, thank you. I want to begin just by talking a little bit about uh, the ashram and what it is like, what it is for us, and my home, my spiritual home. We're coming to you folks from Taos, New Mexico, and as Nikesha would agree with me, this is deeply sacred land. It's land that's been part of Taos Pueblo for a long, long time. Taos Pueblo is the longest continuously inhabited place in the United States, over 1,000 years of unbroken living and lineages and cultures of trade and hunting, of slavery and folly and rebellion. And it's a wonderful place with amazing depth and history. And that depth and history and the land and the spirits of the land and the spirits of the water, the spirits of the sky create this amazing valley where the sacred is alive in a way that it isn't across much of the world. There are far too many places in the world that may have had sacred energies, but they've been dissipated, or places that never had significant sacred energy. But Taos has that. And, I often tell people who ask me, I say, well, if this was India, we'd have 250 temples in the place we have here, because it is just so alive. In this aliveness, we have an even more special place, which is the ashram. Our guru is Neem Karoli Baba. Uh, it was very funny. For a while, it was very quiet, and then thanks to cricketers and tech bros, he's suddenly become famous again. But whether he's famous or not, he's the one who touches our hearts and touches our souls and guides us into our deepest truths. And so that's where, and this ashram that was set up has been an amazing place of inclusion and of acceptance. It starts, of course, with the fact that it was set up by hippies who went to India in the 60s and 70s and found Gurudev through different places, different reasons, different people. And when they came back to the US and set this up, I think it's an interesting mix, both of the radical hospitality that was shown to them by the Indians, most of whom were coming from small villages or isolated communities where they weren't used to these young white people who were behaving in such strange ways, especially for their times and their social mores, and their own values of inclusion, of radical acceptance, of selfless and fearless inquiry that shaped the hippie movement. And I think that those things have combined to create an ashram that feels incredibly welcoming, incredibly open, incredibly generous to a fault in some ways. And I think that's part of what shapes the joy that we take in the Hindu traditions and in the Hindu ways, that we accept and include and joyously come together. And that's a big part of what really gives me life around being at the ashram and doing seva there, is that we celebrate the amazing diversity, amazing uniqueness of people, and are able to then enjoy all the different ways in which they come to life. Nikesha, you spend an incredible amount of time at the ashram, so I'm curious what your thoughts on the ashram are and what you see or feel.
Yes, um, I agree with all that you just shared, and the ashram is also my home. You travel all over the world with my art practice and my work, and this home and this temple is the thing that always is, the replenisher for my life. It's the foundation, and the ashram is really the root of that, and Neem Karoli Baba the root of that. And I've been coming to the ashram for 26 years. I first arrived in 1999. So gosh, almost 27 years now, I guess, but I don't know what, I have to think of which month it was. But I was a young person. I was barely 20 years old, and I was, really had no idea. The story of how I came to the ashram is quite unique. I don't know if we'll jump right into that, but the foundation of it as a space where so many people from so many walks of life and religious backgrounds and spiritual backgrounds and racial backgrounds and relationships to Neem Karoli Baba or to Hanuman, the way that they all come together and find some sense of sanctuary, at the ashram, and some real true feeling of blessing is incredible to witness over all of these years. And me and Punya served together on the Neem Karoli Baba Ashram's board. I'm the secretary of the board for the last, I guess I've been on the board for the last 6 years, but secretary for the last three. And yeah, having even that view of how to handle and hold and navigate an ashram, that is having such exponential growth and exponential, effect and impact, is also quite an incredible honor and challenge too. I would say it's a great one. It's the best. But yeah, I'm not sure. Do we want to talk a little bit about yeah, how we came into the ashram, or do we want to talk about how would you want to move forward with the conversation, Punya?
Well, no, if there's something else you want to say about the ashram, I think that's great. But otherwise, tell us how you came here. I think that is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I was not born into a Hindu family or community or, in fact, no one in my family is Hindu. I have 10 brothers and sisters, and a huge extended family. I have 35 nieces and nephews.
Oh,
Actually, one of my nephews just married an Indian woman, which was so exciting. They, went to India. He was learning all these dances, and I was like, I have like 26 years experience with Indian community. It was kind of a sweet connection with my cousin. But um,
nice.
yeah, as a young child, I grew up in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, up in the northwestern part of the country. And very, very remote. Lived in a very, very, very small town, less than 2,000 people in this very tiny little farm town, and I was actually the only Black person, other than my stepfather and my younger brothers and sisters who were mixed, in the whole town, as a young child, which was pretty remarkable. In Oregon, as some may know, was at one point an all-white state. It was a sundown state, and has some of the harshest segregation laws in the country. Even to like myself growing up, it was highly segregated. There was areas that were really very much all Black or all white. So I grew up in a very small country town as the only Black child in the town, and which started a sort of unique experience where I was often sort of isolated in my family and in my home. And in that space, I found my godmother, when I was 8 years old, died tragically, and we inherited all of her belongings. And in that was the book Be Here Now that she had received from a friend in 1982. So
Mm.
it's one of like right first printing early book, and it was inscribed like "Happy Birthday, Carol," from Uncle Tom, and Carol dies. I found this book and basically stole it because it was really cool. It had all these great pictures in it. And this book, Be Here Now, of course, is written by Ram Dass. And I, as an 8-year-old and very precocious reader, really, I liked the pictures. I liked some of the stories. I didn't quite get it. But what happened to me was that I saw this image of Neem Karoli Baba in the book. And he somehow stuck in my mind. And it became this thing where I would just open the book just to look at him. And I'd never maybe seen an Indian man before. I think I really hadn't at that time. I was so isolated in this small town. I'd never seen, and there was something about him in his eyes and his smile. There was something that just like struck me. And I'd also, in that collection of books that I stole, I found a book on meditation by Mantak Chia and a book on Taoism by Alan Watts, all of which were incredibly interesting to me. And so, I held this little stack of books as my sacred books, and I would hide away in my house and I would, read them, I would meditate, and I would think about Neem Karoli Baba. And eventually it became my daily practice and my salvation, where I would run away from all 10 of my brothers and sisters, sit on this one little windowsill and put blankets in like a little blanket fort, and I would do my meditation. But really it was just sitting quietly until Baba would come. And Baba would come to me and sit next to me as like my friend. And he came as a child. He didn't come as an old man. He was like this little boy that was my age and would just sit next to me. And I remember so clearly that it's like almost like brings tears to me sometimes, like this, like he would just sit there and we would dangle our feet off of the edge. I was sitting on this like windowsill on the upstairs, like looking, so my legs would hang off, but in my mind, it was the stars underneath my feet. So we were sitting on the edge of the world with these stars just underneath our feet. And we would look out over this infinite space, and I could talk to him about all the things that were happening, at home, which there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of trauma, there was a lot of things that were happening in my home that were very hard. And Baba became like the person for me that I could really be with. And it was a major part of my life. I was that weird kid in the family that was mostly sitting in a corner meditating, talking to Baba, like this like imaginary person in a blanket. And so, I moved out of my family home when I was 15 years old, and I started to live wherever I could with friends. And I had, a whole quite wild journey from 15 to 19 years old, where I moved out of my state. I just found my way, found jobs, made fake IDs, all of the things that, a young person does coming out of difficult situations. And but Baba was always there. Like Baba was just like my constant companion and my kind of like real solid friend, throughout my life. And I didn't really go further into studying more about Neem Karoli Baba. I didn't need to. It was just, he was my friend. He was my buddy in my head. I would sit and I meditate, we'd talk. We were kind of like my therapist, my doctor, like my person. And I didn't tell anyone about him because there was no need to. And it was just my own. And I ended up very randomly, actually, in Taos, New Mexico. I never knew how to drive. I had a bike and a backpack. I had like maybe $200. I got dropped off in this town, literally, and was hanging out in a cafe one day. And this young man comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, how you doing? Haven't seen you around. Do you like music? There's this place in town where they do music on Tuesdays. It's a pretty cool spot if you want to check it out." And he gives me the ashram's address. And so I, again, 19 years old, just coming out of my own whirlwind of life, show up at this place thinking there's just going to be some cool music. I don't even know what kind of music. It was just, oh, it's an ashram. What's that? Like, I was so not having any idea. And I walked into the doors and I saw my friend. I saw this big picture of Neem Karoli Baba, like, and I was shocked and like kind of like, I was like, wait, what are you guys doing with him? This is my friend. Like, how is this? Where am I? Like, I was really, truly, internally shocked. I'd never been to a place that even knew who my friend was,
Mm,
let alone this ashram. Like, I was like, this is for him. Where
mhm,
am I? How is this happening? I was really moved. There was a man singing in the temple. Later, I found out his name was Dylan, who became one of my dearest and best friends, singing this song in a language I'd never heard before. Of course, it was the Hanuman Chalisa. I sat and I listened and I listened and I listened. And I've been here for 26 years. I never left. I never left. I'm still listening. I'm still listening. And yeah, that's truly it. I completely changed my entire life and course of direction to
mm,
not leave this place. You know,
mhm,
and everything that has come. I have two children, both of the fathers. I have two different dads. Both have come from the ashram. Both are devotees. You know, I have my entire career, my whole world, you know, was born out
mhm,
of that. Really, you know, finding the home of this temple.
mm. Wow. That's beautiful, Nikesha. Isn't it amazing how he reels us in from wherever we are? It's like the stories are just mind-blowing. So it's just
Yeah, I never even called myself a Hindu. My son was like, "You're a Hindu?" I mean, he was born at the ashram and spent every day of his life at the ashram with me, you know, and I literally live a block away. And yeah, and it was funny. He's like, "Yeah, I guess you are a Hindu." I was like, "Yeah, I'm a Hindu." I mean, mostly it's that I am Neem Karoli Baba's kid.
right.
But yeah, he's taught me what it means to be a Hindu. I'm learning from him, from the temple.
But it is an ongoing journey, isn't it? To what is it to be a Hindu? And I think that uh, I think that's actually part of where the ashram is part of, I think, a global movement by Indians and others to say, what is a Hindu, right? To say that we're Hindu because we love God, because we love our traditions, we love our possibilities, and not because of some piece of paper or some thread that you can wear and so on. And I think that's just so important that Baba teaches us this thing about love, right? And love in so many forms. I loved your image of you sitting with him on the windowsill, feet dangling, chatting with each other. One of my favorite things is, on the back porch of the ashram, just outside his office. I sit out there, especially in the summers, with a cup of chai, and we'll gossip together, right?
Yeah.
And he and I will talk about, and I'll tell him, like, can you imagine what this person did? And, because there's got to be some place, it's been, what, 30 years for me now of being at the ashram. So we've seen a lot. And there's some place where I can go whine about everything I see. And so I can sit out there with him and I can whine at him, like, do you believe what they did now? Do you believe what happened? And that actually is part of what replenishes me. So I can then go out and pretend to be all adult and, cheerful, sort of like, that's okay, we can go deal with this and so on and so forth. But that space he gives us to be human, to be vulnerable, to be scared, to be tired. I think that is so important that, it's that space that welcomes us in our weaknesses, in our shallowness, in our failures. That's part of what I love about him is that he accepts me and helps me. He doesn't just accept me, he actually helps me when I fail, right?
Mhm.
When I have done something stupid, I feel very comfortable going up to him and saying, by the way, I screwed that up. And I know that he'll help me. He'll accept me. He'll help me. And I think that is just so important that we are loved in that way, in that deep way, and that we're held in that deep way, right? I just find that so important. Like when I'll make a mistake and I'll make, several every day that I'm there, and he'll hold me. Um, I remember I used to get cocky about it when I was a bit younger, and someone said something to me, and I said, "Well, it's very simple. That when I know that when I screw up, I'm doing my best to do his work, and if I screw up, then it's his problem. He needs to fix it. And there's some responsibility I can take for not screwing up, but then the rest of it, like, I don't know, man. Baba, what do you want?" And so it's been incredibly liberating in some ways to have that as the backstop, right? That I'm held, I'm loved, I'm cared for, and so I can go forth and screw up,
Mhm.
and learn a lot from screwing up, and hopefully not hurt too many people while screwing up. There are times I have hurt people, and it's been very sad. But you keep learning, right? Because we're not going to end up doing this way.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what is it like for you to have your life, be so centered around the ashram in that way. Like what does that mean for you? And obviously, as you spend time here, your art career sort of built and grew and changed through this time. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think, that is one of the things that is for me, it's kind of like a hidden secret power, right? The ashram and my relationship with Baba is like my secret engine. People in the art world say, "How do you do all of this? What is it that feeds your soul, to do this work that you do and such difficult work?" My work is centered in profound grief, societal grief and ancestral grief and personal grief and how do you hold all of it together? And, it really is my relationship to Baba and the temple that feeds it. And it's these fundamental understandings that I've gained over
Hmm.
these years, around service and around love and around, like truly that, love everyone is one of the most powerful teachings of the universe. And it allows me to and serve everyone truly open up my compassion in a way that creates a field where I can create all of this artwork that helps people move through healing and grief, right? So like
Mm,
I see it as the true engine, right? Is the ashram. Like my artwork is dealing with ancestral, particularly African diasporic, um, ancestral pain and trauma, through histories of enslavement, through histories of abuse and, genocide and trafficking and, years of disenfranchisement and all of that, together, like to be able to actually serve a pain that is that big, right?
mm,
You need to have yeah, a width of compassion that I think can only come from like this
mm,
deep well that Baba gives, right? And
mm,
so like um I couldn't do it without it. I couldn't at all. I couldn't feel all of that pain and move it and create artwork that acknowledges it, without it. So for example, um one of my largest works that I've done, and I think most impactful works I've done, is this piece called 108 Death Masks. And there's actually
mm,
some hanging on the wall behind me. And that was a really profound desire in me to acknowledge and really want to hold like each of the faces of the
mm,
people in my ancestral lines that had been lost, to just
mm,
begin to acknowledge so many people that I would never know their faces, never see their faces. Their faces weren't honored, weren't photographed, weren't drawn, weren't that their true names and their true lives weren't held in the love that they and compassion, most that had
mm,
died and enslaved. I was like, how can I hold them? How can I honor them? How can I, give offering to them?
mm,
And so I needed to, in a way, like make a murti, but not, but like I had to make their image in some way. And so I thought about this process of death masks, and the sculpting of ancestors and, what it would look like to do that without any images, because there are no images, right? What does it actually, feel like? And I, drew from my, understandings of the practices that I've learned at the ashram as well, in prayer, right? And
mm,
so I decided to step into a puja, a ritual puja, where every aspect of my offering, was given to the ancestors to be able to make a face. So
mm,
for 108 days, one full mala, 108 days, I did the same prayer every single day, right?
mm,
had one piece of clay that I, would lay out flat and scar with history. I would, set it on a mold that would be the size of a head, my own head, till it would dry. And then I would carve it without any photos, without any, images, like just praying into this one face. I would, give like layers and layers and layers of offering to this one
Mm.
individual, and imagine what they would look like without
Mm.
anything else. And then when at the end of the day, I would put it away and I would, go and I would, study and put myself to bed. But I put myself through a daily 108 days straight ritual
Wow.
puja, right?
Wow.
And in the end, at the very end, then, I had all of these 108 masks, each one unique, each one different, each one filled with this prayer. And, when they were all finished, of course, I offered them flowers and water and fruit and incense and arti lamp, because, that's what I know. And so, but people in the art world, contemporary art world, they don't really get all that part. They're like, it's a piece of art. It's like, wait, what do you mean? But for me, that's inseparable. And so I think like that's just a piece on the sort of the process, but even the work of civil rights work, social justice work, healing work, all of this is embedded inside what I learned also from the Hindu
Well,
practice.
just to go back to what you described with the masks, I think that is so beautiful. The puja, the daily offering, and then the offering at the end. In our traditions, it's not something we do a lot of at the ashram, but the Hindu traditions spend a lot of time talking about the ancestors, right? They talk a lot about the Pitris. There's a whole month devoted to them. There's the Indians come and they're often upset that I'm not doing whatever the right thing to do at that time is, but I'm not that interested in those aspects of Hinduism, right? I'm much more like I love Baba and I love philosophy and that's sort of my thing. And so the rituals and stuff don't touch me that much. But that is a huge part of the Indian tradition is the Hindu traditions is the praying to the ancestors, feeding the ancestors,
Exactly.
caring for the ancestors. And so there's this lovely resonance as work through your own the histories of dispossession and so on, as you include that and you create the puja. I think that's just so beautiful that you do that. I know we plan to show some pictures of your work. Do you think there's a good time to ask Mayank about that?
Yeah, sure.
And then we can
Yes.
go to the next pieces around the current thing. Mayank, are you available?
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah. Is this?
That's our guru.
Yes.
That's Nikesha offering the arti to people at the end of a Sunday puja. I'm there. Welcome towards Hanumanji, and
Beautiful.
these are the masks. Nikesha, anything you want to say about this?
Sure. Yeah. So this is the masks, as you saw the last slide, were in ceramic, and that's how I created the work. And you can see some of those details of scarring and historical kind of markings that happen in the bodies of the clay. But the next slide is the installation of these masks done as bronze. I actually was invited by the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama, as Sunita had said earlier, to create a huge 100-foot long wall installation of all 108 death masks cast in bronze for their opening of their Freedom Monument Sculpture Park. And this work, I actually took all of the ceramic masks to Ghana, West Africa, returned back to the land of my ancestors, and learned from a master bronze caster how the ancestors actually did traditional bronze casting. So in the earth, smelting their own metals, and developing everything, utilizing all the natural materials from the land. So I went for 5 months and learned traditional bronze casting to cast each and every one of these masks in a similar, almost 108-day ritual. So every single mask then was individually cast in the same prayer. And also given the same offering. So that is installed as a permanent national monument honoring the 6 million people who died in enslavement in the United States. It's in Montgomery. This is an installation that's actually currently at the Albuquerque Museum here in New Mexico, but this was shown at the Form and Concept Gallery in Santa Fe, and it's a boat that I made. The whole installation was a 5,000 square foot immersive installation, moving through multiple sites of healing of diasporic trauma. This boat, and you'll see in the next picture as well, but this boat is made from, actually go back, Mayank. It's made from hundreds of hand-etched copper plates. Every single plate you see on the boat is etched with prayers from multiple African diasporic ancestral languages. And I actually constructed the entire boat. So I built it with the wood, did all of the framing, and then hand-stitched every single copper plate after I hand-etched them. And then underneath is 2,000 pounds of composted cotton. And then there's cotton that's rising up around it. And so as a part of this installation, I actually did a 12-hour puja where I buried 4 women inside the cotton and did flower abhishek to them, and then unburied them, and then did a whole like water washing bath puja to their bodies inside the boat. So if you go to the next slide, you can see on the inside of the boat, there's a 6-foot long etched copper plate with 3 figures. So that plate sort of becomes the foundation for the ritual washing, and you can see all the flowers that are there were all from the laying of the flowers in the ritual. So that's a very extensive way that my artwork interfaces with my ritual puja, and practice. And again, the prayer is really to the ancestors, and through the bodies of these women, it's praying that we are able to return to our ancestral lines through our bodies. Next slide. This piece here, and in the last slide you saw, this is a land effigy. All of the pieces that you see are all pieces that I collected on the land where the piece is made. So this was in Las Cruces. The bones and the antlers and the branches, everything was collected as a part of honoring the land. Something that's really important to me in my work is relationship to Indigenous lands, and the, really truly giving homage to the spirits of the land. So that is there paired with a drawing of an archival drawing from the Library of Congress of 2 young boys from the 1800s. And this and the last slide are pieces from my most recent installation in Sydney, Australia, which is honoring over 2,300 firsthand oral history narratives of individuals that were enslaved in the United States. These are all photos of formerly enslaved peoples, and printed as large-scale cyanotypes, which are big sun prints on cotton. And then the next slide is a picture of the larger installation, where I built a 23-meter tree out of thousands of meters of cotton as a sanctuary for story and storytelling and listening. I also built the cabin that you see there, this entire warehouse. That cabin is a traditional cabin from the 1800s where you could hear stories of formerly enslaved people as walk through it. So yeah, that's my work. I think that's the last one. Yes, and that was all around.
Stunning. There's such depth and so much work, and there's a certain physicality to your art that is really amazing. There's a physicality and a ceremony that's just really beautiful and very deep. Thank you.
Thank you, Punya.
Lovely to hear your story around that as you do that. So thank you. Yeah. So, and as you talk, Nikesha, I'm just very struck again by how we're bringing the past into the present, that the violence of the past and the oppression of the past, and it's not like it's gone away, but how do we bring it into the future to create a better world? And I think that's part of the work, especially as you mentioned, Montgomery and the amazing museum they built there. all the different pieces there. But talk a little bit about how you see this link between the past and the present and helping us create a new future.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that that's just it is such an important part of my work is this relationship to time. You know, I really, I mean, when we think of it in that linear way, past is obvious and deeply affecting the present. So part of our present, it's an active participant, and we have all of this capacity to create, our futures. I tend to kind of switch around the linearity of things when I think about
Mm.
time.
Mhm.
And I often will, even physically, like you said, there's a physicality. I imagine instead of like the past behind me and the future in front of me, I actually tend to turn around in my
Mm.
internal consciousness and I
Mhm.
look at the past in front of me. And what I see when I look at it that way is that there are so many spaces. Like there's when you see everything that's been, it's
Mhm.
easier to navigate. Like when the past is there, I can see the spaces between, right? I
Mhm.
can see the ways that the past is influencing my path and the way that I'm navigating through these new spaces. And that, you know, all of those new spaces are the places for potential, right? The future is actually like, as I move past the past and learn from it, all of that knowledge is flooding back into me and is projecting out what choices I make for the future.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of this like toroid like shape, this like metaphysical toroid where you're moving through the past and it's
Mhm.
coming back into behind
Right.
you and affecting what you do.
Mhm.
And that perspective shift, when I really sat with that, especially when I was in West Africa, I was listening to so many proverbs and talking to some of the elders there, and I learned about the concept of Sankofa. Sankofa is an Akan proverbial story and image. They call it, these symbols they call adinkra, which are these really stories written into images
Mm.
that carry their teachings and knowledge. So Sankofa, the image is the image of a bird turning its head and turning its beak onto its back and actually
Mm.
pulling an egg from its back.
Huh. Pulling an
And
egg.
yeah, so it's like a interesting image of time because the bird is like walking forward, turning backwards,
Mhm.
and retrieving an egg.
Mm.
And so the idea of this proverb is that we are this bird, right? Moving forward. And the saying, the proverb is like, it's okay to go back and get it.
Ah.
Which is like we as we go walking forward to go back into the past, we're actually pulling forward the egg, the future itself. We're pulling forward like these gems. It's important to go back and get it. It's okay to go back and get it. It's important for us because that's where the new birth lives. That's where the
Mm.
new things live. And
Mhm.
so that illustration plays out through everything that I do. All of my artwork, even as I'm going so deeply into the past, I'm actually pulling up this like pain and trauma and grief for us to look at it and to be able to sort through and pull from it all of the ways, all of the things that are the precious eggs that we want to birth. We
Right.
learn from, the pain how to shift it, how to survive it, how to think differently, how to, imagine a new world. All of those things come because we look squarely at what has been and what has worked and not worked.
Right. It's one thing I find very important. When I worked in South Africa just after apartheid ended, and I spent time with activists and folks on the ground, and there was this very strong struggle of how do we survive, how do we build a future, how do we build an economic base for our people to live, because the economics in South Africa was so segregated that people were struggling with that. But there was also this very deep sense of how do we face what we have? My friends created a Nobel Peace Spark Prize because South Africa is the only nation to have four peace laureates. you know. And the families came, and Desmond Tutu came, and they talked. And a big part of what they all mentioned, and I'd see that with people that I drive with or talk to as I was walking around, was this willingness to look at the brutality and also to forgive the past and sort of move on. So there was a way in which their ability to look at it enabled them to forgive. And I think that it's so important here because for so long it's been silenced in this country where we don't learn a lot of the truths, that bringing this to life is what will enable a different quality of reconciliation and healing. Because without that, we're really still stuck, right? We were stuck with the silences and the unexpressed and the unacknowledged uh, horrible, horrible events, disgraceful behaviors by humans that trap us, right? The lack of knowledge traps us. So,
Exactly.
no, part of what I love here, as you're talking, Nikesha, is the way in which you have single-handedly reinvented the connections between the Indian traditions and the civil rights traditions in the US, right? There's a way in which they have a long history. Like, Black American church leaders went to India in the 30s and 40s to learn from Mahatma Gandhi and learn from this nonviolent movement. And then through the 50s and 60s, a lot of Indians had come who worked with the Black church leaders on nonviolent strategies and so on. And there was this very rich history of conversation and support and engagement. And it's interesting because, sad as I am to acknowledge it, a lot of my ethnic Indians are racist. You know, they're very anti-black. A lot of Trump supporters and so on. But there has always been this deep love and this deep connection between the liberation movements, between the Hindus who are liberatory and the Black Christians who are liberatory, right, as against the fake Christians that we have so many of in this country. And this sense in which how we come together really makes a difference to us. Whether it is the March to Selma that Sunita was talking about, or the different ways in which the art comes about. But this sense of joy in coming together. And I think that's one thing I'm really curious about, your sense about current liberation efforts, and where is the joy in the work that we need to do?
Ooh, where's the joy?
Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is, I really do love like just the truth of the long-standing history of relationship, between the connected liberation movements in India and, African diasporic and African, liberation struggles across the world. And I think, it is just so sad and so true that anti-Black racism is rampant everywhere, all over the world, and in so many different ways and so many different communities, and it shows up in ways you wouldn't expect, and it's deeply seated. And yeah, the joy piece is so important. I One of the things I love about our temple, is that we're bhaktis. We sing, our prayer, and we, there's a credible ecstatic joy, that can come up in the body and in prayer, and in this, like, giving oneself over to the divine. And I think that there's in the liberation struggle, the ability to tap into, like, to joy, into to like loving celebration, into like this like quality of faith and devotion that comes from bhakti, like that is what keeps it alive, right? Like that is in every single front line, right? Like the most powerful front line is going to be the one that is going to be filled with like this sense of joy and power. I mean, that's pushing behind it. Of course,
Right.
there's violence on the front line as well. But, I think that our joy has to come from the big things, like the big ways that we come together, like when we come together and we actually create space for dance and music and the energy that builds in, and singing, of course, so many songs of resistance and resilience. These are powerful heart songs,
Mhm.
that like that is connected. It also comes from these like very small experiences of preciousness and connection that happen within liberation struggle, like the places where we really on the like small side are supporting
Right.
and connecting and developing relationship and love and connection, and you know being together, eating together, sharing prasad together. Like, I think these teachings that we get, of course, from our practice, Hindu practice, right, of serving, that those things do bring joy too, right? Like when we can really serve and eat and share together. Yeah, it's layered. I kind of like am weaving in and out of this question because I think that joy has to be that layered. I think that joy comes from us really knowing that it is the foundation of everything, that it's what we're fighting for. And so we have to keep it as the center.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think that's just so important, that we have that joy and that weaving together. Is like in India recently, the student movements have been very powerful and very successful against an authoritarian regime. And part of what they've done is that they've been outspoken, they have been rude. The poor prime minister was whining about, oh, these people were mean to me. They said mad things about me. This guy has a history of abusing people like you cannot imagine. And they were funny. They were so funny. There's like memes and videos and posters, and they just sort of broke through this uh, polite, revolution that people kept doing. Like, we're going to protest, but we're going to protest in a polite way. And the kids were like, fuck that. We don't do this shit. We're going to go do, express ourselves. And it was brilliant. And the fact was that they had no answer to that. The authoritarians really hate being laughed at, whether it's Putin or Xi or, Kim or Donald. They hate being laughed at. And this was true in India just now when the kids just went for it and, said, we don't listen to your norms. We are going to celebrate. And a couple of the ones I loved was the police were throwing tear gas at the kids. Like, can you imagine? 17, 18-year-old kids, they're throwing tear gas at them because they want to go say, hey, fix my exams, people. So in Bihar, they didn't throw tear gas at them, and the kids started protesting. They said, what is wrong with us? Why are we not good enough for your tear gas? Where is the tear gas? Bring it out. They totally flipped the script on them, and I love that whole thing. So but I also want to come back to what you said, Raul. So I love that sense of joy and humor. I think the front lines, need that, and they build that. In my youth, the places where I went and marched or supported, you have that, right? Connections where, like, one of my best friends for a while was an Afrikaner, white Afrikaner, and he and I were joking that who would have ever expected that, you know, a good Indian boy like you would have a friend like me? And I was like, yeah, because why would I, but he fought in the struggles, right? He was one of those who went to jail and was in the struggles, and he was a race traitor, and so am I in some ways. And so we were friends through that. And I think that's where the joy comes in, and I think where the replenishment comes in, this is tied to what you said earlier, Nikesha, is like someplace like the ashram where in some ways it's a given, right? We've built this institution, and you and I spend time every day, every week rebuilding that institution, because institutions don't get built once and done. It's an ongoing process. But where, when I came to the ashram, they talked about three things. They said, love everyone, feed everyone, tell the truth. And as far as I'm concerned, the first and the third are too difficult, so we feed everyone, right? So we have the free lunch, and we have the free dinner, and we have the free chai, and it's there, and it's we give, and it's so important that we have the space for replenishment and for renewal, and that we can show up. And there are days I'm tired and I can't do much, but I'm still cared for. And there are days when, we work our butts off, or like you sing through the night on a festival, or work through the night. So I think that places like the ashram, looping it back to where we started, that sense of the ashram, how it comes together, how it pulls together is so important for us to be able to think about that.
Yeah.
It gives us a space for us to really build the energy to go out into the world and do something again, right? Because, like you said, I think you said this earlier, right? Like, this is where you get the energy to go out and do stuff, and this is where we
Yeah,
come home. And
exactly. No, it is foundational. And, I think that, yeah, when we really are looking at like this way that our connection of human rights and civil rights, like how we can develop and think of our new futures, I think we do have to, yeah, like, yeah, as equally as we're looking at breaking systems and changing systems and calling to account, violence and, spaces that are harmful, to each other and the planet. Like, we are equally building systems of joy and connection and feeding and supporting and nourishing our communities, and that has to be an equal push, no matter what it is that we're doing and wherever we're coming from, and I think that, yeah, there's a lot of complexities and things like that when it comes to, yeah, to ashrams and all that. Also, like, I think about, like, my brain just jumps, like, where it's like you can also get into a bubble in an ashram and think you're doing so good because you're feeding or you're doing the thing, and it's like it's always both, right?
Mhm.
It's always both, and so how we are supporting the, actual system changes and sometimes, radical systems changes at the same time as building, solid supports and foundational, communities and relationships, that can catch everything when it starts breaking down. Like that has to be a tandem game, and so that's it. I think at our ashram, we're also learning that too. I think we or maybe need to learn it more, but like trying to keep that as foundational.
Yeah, I think that's really important, right? That it's not as if the ashram is some magical space because the guru is there and therefore we are doing right. I mean, it's been embarrassing for me that every so often I end up being the man. I am the man
Right.
that they want to protest against. I'm like, why did that happen?
I know.
No. So, and it's, and they're right. So, right? There are times when we have screwed up and we need to do better. And it is easy to be in the bubble. It is easy to be in like, oh my God, it's like remember, like, I used to have to walk uphill both ways in the snow, barefoot to get to school, right? It's like that story, right? Oh, do you know how far we've come? This doesn't matter, right? Because where we have to go is what matters, and how we build that is what matters. So I think that link between the massive, the large scale changes that we want to see in the world and the small scale building of a good world, needs that same level of rigor of looking in, of saying, hey, wait a minute, what the hell? We need to do better. And that quest, I think, is very important for us as we do this work. And I think that the honesty that it calls for is very much a part of the spiritual journey, right? Because it's easy to bypass, it's easy to split, it's easy to pretend otherwise. But to have that patience to do that looking is really important. So, any other last thoughts from me before we go to question and answers, Nikesha?
Um, no, I think we had a great conversation. I'd love to hear what folks have to, if there's any questions out there.
Or
Yeah, anything
comments?
additionally. Yeah, comments. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see.
I'm not seeing any, but Punya, do you have any other points or anything that you would like to discuss before we can wrap up?
Oh, I think one thing I want to just say, we didn't talk much about my journey coming here,
Yeah,
but
I'd love to hear
I
that.
want to say that one thing that was interesting for me when I ended up here, Baba dragged me out here and, took his sweet time doing it, but he started well before I came to America and, changed my PhD and made things really messy. But one of the sweetest parts was the fact that it was at a Native American ceremony that I actually broke my heart open.
Mm.
So I was, growing up in India, I was very much, Brahminical without necessarily thinking about it. Like, I'm a Gyan yogi. I'm going to be like, very uh, focused on things. And when I was in my PhD program, I was like, well, I want to write papers that three people can understand, because if four people can understand it, that's too many. I'm being too easy, right? And so on and so forth. And then I was worried, though, that I'd end up doing karma yoga, because I kept working with nonprofits and NGOs, and I was working with social change movements in India, and I was working with people who were doing all these things, and I was volunteering for them. And I was like, I don't want this to be my life. I don't want this to be my world, but damn it, it looks like it will be my world and life. And I was like, I wonder how that works. But bhakti was never seen as something important or real. Bhakti was what weak people did. Bhakti was what people who didn't have the brains to actually think did. Bhakti was the secondary, tertiary, sad little thing that people did because they didn't know any better. Anyway, I ended up going to Sundance, the Lakota Sundance out in Rosebud Reservation, my first summer that I was here, totally without making a single effort to it. And it was funny, later on, I kept hearing from people who kept trying to go there and never being able to get there. And the gods just put me there. And I'm out there, and it's cold and it's raining, and I'm sitting out hunched in this little shelter with a few people. And this native elder, Lakota elder, later on I knew him as Uncle Albert. At that time, he was just this guy. And he's sitting around looking at us. Oh, good. We finally have people from all the continents represented here. And I'm like, wait, 2 billion Indian and Chinese? That's me? Like seriously. Um, but he was very pleased that I was there. And then as we started the ceremony itself, it is so beautiful. It is so powerful. It just broke my heart open. And suddenly I was like fully in tune with bhakti. And
Mm.
this happened before I came to the ashram. And part of what happened there was that people keep seeing Hanumanji in the skies. They kept seeing a monkey. I didn't see the monkey. Other people around me saw the monkey, and they were freaking out. And so I started telling Hanumanji stories to people to help them understand why a monkey would be in the sky. So, he was there when I was at this ceremony. My heart was cracking open. Baba was right there, and I had no idea. And then it's after that I came to Taos, like days after that I came to Taos, and I found the ashram, and everything else moved from there. But Gurudev just was like, this child is on totally the wrong track. I'm going to crack his heart open. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to go send him there. I'm going to go do this. And it was just like amazing. Like the way he did it was so beautiful and so amazing. And I spent 30 years after that. My wife and I spent 30 years praying with the Lakota and doing ceremony with them, and, being family with them in different parts of the world. And it's just been such an amazing journey. But I just want to highlight that, Mayank, as part of your talk about the indigenous traditions. Like, they're very alive. So they work in ways that are very non-linear or they don't work like, the textbooks say. They work in ways that are very unexpected and surprising. So just that. And it's been just such a delight. So yeah. So
Uh,
thank you.
we have two.
Yeah, I love that story, Punya. I didn't know that you had such a depth of relationship with the Navajo traditions. I love that.
We just have two questions in the Q&A, so I'll post them. So
There's a
Nikesha
few
and
more, it
Punya,
looks like, too.
how do you see your ashram dealing with the global environmental crisis in which the US is totally embroiled as a bad actor? The other one's asking if there's any successor or spokesperson to Baba, and then
So let's just take them one at a time. I think
yeah.
the ashram clearly sees the environmental crisis as a problem, and we are working on it. Like, so we, in our own place, we, for example, focus on organic, we focus on local, we have our own farm where we grow foods and so on. We have a very high water table, so we actually can water well in a way and our acequias are fed by streams. So we do pay attention to what it is. And I think that's just really important. So we see ourselves as part of the solution, with permaculture and so on. Uh, but obviously, there's always more we can do, because we are constrained. Whereas, like any institution, we have some constraints, but we very much see ourselves as working on the solution. Nikesha, would you have a thought on that?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, we are small. I mean, we're getting larger obviously all the time. But we have our farm, we have compost, we do what we can on our small scale. You
Oh,
know, we reduce, we have most of our food, almost 80% of the food that we serve comes from donation. So we are, and then we also donate quite a large amount of food to local food banks and homeless shelters and community feeding across the state. And so there's a way we're moving food through, which is supporting our environment. There's so much more that can be done, of course, to really address environmental crisis. But as an ashram, yeah, we're doing every small thing we can and always looking to more. We're in the solar capital of the world here in Taos. There's conversations around how to support our electric use as we expand. And creating more solar. There's a lot of things that we can do more. We have permaculture farm. We have water works that we support local animals in the area. So yeah, there's a lot of pieces there. There's a couple more questions. One I wanted to address. One question, someone asked if Neem Karoli Baba was alive, or if there's another successor. He is not alive. When was his death? Mahasamadhi?
73.
73. Yeah, is when he had his Mahasamadhi, and there's not a successor, for Neem Karoli Baba or anything. And so we've all, there's many in the temple who know him when he was alive, but I've only had Neem Karoli Baba as a disembodied guru. And that kind of leads into the next question, which says, Nikila wrote, I'm on a spiritual journey, but for me personally, I try not to invest all my spirituality in individual charismatic figures, be them Muhammad Gandhi, MLK, or Neem Karoli Baba, because everyone has flaws and fallibility. In our spirituality and political activism, how do we make meaning of these figures while also recognizing them as fallible humans? I think that is a great question, and I also align and agree to that. It's very important, in all of our work, to not put all of our spiritual energy into any one individual, charismatic individual idea, individual belief system. Truly, to pigeonhole our minds, our work, and our practice, I think is dangerous as a whole. And I think that the fallibility of humans. One of the things, Neem Karoli Baba, yes, was a human being, and a Satguru. I think of Neem Karoli Baba as like a kind of funny. He's funny, and he is totally human and plays tricks on you, and just sometimes can be mean, and can be like there's no kind of pedestal. Even if I think of Neem Karoli Baba as this powerful guru who is affecting my life and millions of others through time, and beyond our kind of regular ideas of what a being can do and be, I also see them as fallible, and a perfect reflection of all of us and all of our humanities, and so I think that it's just that it's very important, and I think healthy to keep those layers present in what we're doing. Punya, I'll let you jump in on that too.
I want to say I agree with you on that. And you'll find your own journey as you go through and find a place where you want to connect. But the critical piece for me is the notion of friendship, right? I would think of these people as my friends. I think of MLK as a friend. I think of, Jesus as a friend. I think of Baba very much as my friend. He's my teacher. He's my guru. He's my boss. He bosses me around, tells me what to do. But primarily, he's my friend, right? And friends are allowed to have screw ups. Friends are allowed to have mistakes. Mahatma Gandhi, I think, is one of the most transparent figures about his screw ups, right? The way he wrote about them honestly, about his desire, his sexual desires, his willingness to experiment with that, and so on. Yes, the RSS and their offshoots keep trying to make fun of it and so on. But what they forget is that this is someone who is vigorously examining his internal being and sharing it publicly in a way that most people have been too scared to do, right? And so I think that there's a way in which expressing friendship, understanding friendship, and building friendship with these folks, rather than putting them on a pedestal and worshiping them, I think is really a good start for us. And then, you'll find your own depth. You'll find the places where your depth comes to you. You'll find the places where you say, oh, this is home. And home is going to be imperfect. Home is going to be like, It'll have that chip there, it'll have that crack there, it'll have that burn mark there, but it's home. And once you get home, I think you'll be happy. So,
Yeah, and I want to say too, it's important also, to not ever bypass or spiritually bypass
mhm,
transgression and, things that are not okay or right. There are people, or teachers that have emerged throughout the years that are not good or safe or have done terrible things. And so I
yes.
think it's very important always, as an activist, as someone in spiritual practice, to not bypass those things, to demand layers of accountability from our teachers, embodied and disembodied, and truly, you're like, what the hell are you doing? Like whatever that is, whatever that looks like, to demand accountability of your satsang and your community and any and everyone that are in layers and places of authority in our lives. That we have to hold through our mistakes and through
Mhm,
our transgressions. We have
mhm.
to truly to recognize what reconciliation looks like, what repair looks like, what healing looks like, through what these processes look like inside spiritual practice always.
Absolutely. And I agree with the person who said that, the problem is about the underage people. I think there are many ways in which you can be troubled by what the Mahatma did, right? And I don't want to bypass those. I'm just saying that part of the reason we know about it or think about it is because of his radical honesty. And I just want to appreciate that radical honesty. I'm not claiming that what he did was right or that the methodology he used was appropriate. I frankly don't know enough about it. I did read his Manu, one of the two girls that he was reportedly with, talk about him and the way she talks about him. Now, again, this could be trauma speaking, this could be love speaking. And again, it's in a book, so I don't really have context for that. So I just want to say that, yeah, there are things we don't know. But the reason we know these things is because of a certain willingness to be present and to be open. And I think we should encourage people to do that. I think there's parts of today's culture that have become very punitive in ways that are not helpful for a dialogue, right? And I think we need to find ways to have that space to be human together. It's different if there are things that should be out of the pale, like rape and so on. And there are things where you're going like, wait a minute, I don't understand that. What the hell's going on, right? Places for us to be human and to make mistakes. And I think we need both of those. We need strong boundaries on certain areas. And other places we should be able to have the conversation and say, well, what the hell do you do? What the hell was that about, right? And I think that line changes. So we need to keep building that. Without that capacity for dialogue, you cannot have community, right? You cannot have an ashram. You cannot have a living space. What you end up with is a very narrow cult. And in some ways, that's always been the problem with progressive movements is that we tend to go for purity very quickly. And then with purity, we keep hacking off people who are not pure enough. And we then make ourselves very small. And I think the opposite is needed now, that we need to be more open and more open to people who have made mistakes and more open to people who are willing to learn and are willing to heal and are willing to make it better and build a broader coalition that we can actually connect and engage and do this because the bad guys, they're doing really well for themselves. We need to have a different strategy. And I think the strategy of death by purity is not a good one for us.
And I just want to add to that too, because it connects back to even these like
Hmm.
teachings of Neem Curly Baba, right? We have love everyone, right? Which is what you're speaking to, like this, where
Mhm.
that really is unconditional and understanding, that people make mistakes and holding this wide net of love, and serve everyone, tell the truth, is another one. And that tell the truth, right? We always are like, oh, that's the hardest one, or not really. I mean, they're all so hard, but to tell the truth, I think the nuance of that really does come into this place where, like, when we're talking about accountability for, from them being spiritual leaders to being satsang members or teachers or priests or anyone in these places, like when we are building accountability, and really building a new world of that we want to live in, a world that is healthy and full of joy. We have to go even further with our truth telling, with our
Mhm.
practices of truth telling, which is, how honest we can actually be and break apart all of the glossing over, all of the, softening of edges. There's these places that they can fall into this world of forgiveness that can actually be a form of ignorance. And
Right.
instead, it's about sharpening our tools, which I think about Kali, I think about, the swords, of these deities that are there. It was such sharp precision,
Mhm.
as swords of truth, really cutting through the numbing into exactly what the issues are, what the things are that we need to acknowledge, to bring to light, to
Mhm.
look squarely at, and to work towards repairing. So I think we as a spiritual practitioners need to sharpen our tools more as we move towards the future, sharpen our capacities for both truth telling and truth asking,
Mhm.
and yeah, building together a community where we can stay as accountable as possible to everything that comes up.
Yeah. And I think it's important there, Nikesha, when you said truth telling and truth asking, because I think that a lot of times in our worlds today, we get a snippet from something, and that snippet then becomes the reason why we say, stop, don't, bad. And I think that the ability to ask, the ability to say, wait a minute, what actually happened? What are we doing? And how do we make this better? The truth asking, I think, is a critical additional piece. We need to learn more. We
Yeah.
need to study more. We need to ask more. Uh,
Yeah.
I think our social media driven world is very quick to judgment, and we need to be able to, as spiritual practitioners, hold space and say, wait, I don't know everything that I need to know about this, and what do we need to know more and do more? So we seem to have drifted somewhere. Are there any other questions or anything else?
I don't think so. Do you have any closing words of wisdom or anything like that before we can?
Well, if words of wisdom, we're giving it to Nikesha.
Uh,
Bharat,
we have one more
ah,
question about asking about more about human rights. That we talked more about Neem Karoli Baba and social justice and not enough about human rights. Um, so is there something specific that we want to bring up that is, yeah, aligned there? That was just the last bit. I don't know if we want to address that.
I think I so I do think we've been addressing human rights, right? I think that it's really important to think about human rights in a broad perspective. And when Hindus for Human Rights was founded, we were very clear that we had both a constructive agenda of what does good look like, as well as, if you will, an agenda that's oppositional, saying this is bad and we oppose it, right? So caste is bad, we oppose caste. Uh, you know, Hindutva is bad, we oppose Hindutva. We're very clear on that. Racism is bad, we oppose racism. We support indigenous people, we support, black civil rights, we support all these different things, immigrant rights. And part of what we've been talking about today, Bharat, is really what does it look like when the constructive agenda works, right? And when the ashram for me is an example of what the constructive agenda works. It's a Hinduism that's inclusive. It's a Hinduism that is celebratory. It's a Hinduism that is generous. Um, and I'm sorry you saw us promoting Baba. Baba doesn't need promotion. Our our current discussion of the board is how do we cope with the large number of people that keep coming? So we're not trying to expand expand it in any way. The focus we have is on the ashram as an example of what does it look like when it works? What is the constructive agenda of human rights? And what does good look like? And that's part of what Nikesh and I were celebrating, because that's part of what we're both really grateful for. That's, so important in our lives. Is that fair, Nikesha?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'd like to come back in and, first of all, thank the two of you, Nikesha, Punya, for a really rich and deep conversation. And I want to say in closing and before handing over to Mayank to have the final word, that to remind everybody what the Liberation Baithaks are all about. So we do Hindus for Human Rights is a human rights organization, and we are actively, for instance, right now, working on giving a welcome to Mohan Bhagwat, the head of the RSS, the world's largest fascist organization, who's coming to Canada, US, and UK. And we are very actively doing our human rights work to say that, a Hindu nationalist, literally the head of the RSS, is not welcome. We don't hold our punches. We're doing that work very openly as Hindus. These spaces, the Liberation Baithaks, are special space for us, which I honestly wish they could be in person because they're so intimate. And in each of the Liberation Baithaks, we aspire to go deeper and deeper into the questions and along the path of how do we as Hindus live as anti-caste beings, as liberated beings, as people who will not separate from each other. How do we do that as Hindus? That's the question that we want to get deeper and deeper into through these Baithaks. When we had one on the Unitarian Universalists, we were not promoting that everybody should become that. When we had a Baithak on LGBTQ inclusion and rights, we were not saying everybody should, become LGBTQ. And so today we're not saying everybody should go and follow Baba. We're doing a different thing, which is having a rich, constructive, generative conversation about what it is to be a Hindu, and specifically a liberatory Hindu, a Hindu of conscience. So I hope that's clear, and I hope everybody can see these conversations in that context. And if the human rights is more appealing to you than the Hindu in Hindus for Human Rights, we have so many spaces, and we need you. But just wanted to explain what our Baithaks are about. And we call them Liberation Baithaks for that reason. So thank you so much, both of you. I will see you. I'm heading to the ashram right now after I close my computer. Maybe I'll see you there. And I want to hand over. And thanks for everyone who came. And want to give back to Mayank for one last closing word.
Thank you so much, Sunita, Nikesha, and Punya, for this lovely conversation. For those of you who are not members of Hindus for Human Rights, please consider joining our movement. You can go to hindusforhumanrights.org/join HFHR. We have special perks for members, including once a week after the Baithak, a small intimate space for members to gather and chat called Chota Baithaks. So looking forward to seeing some of you in that. But thank you so much again, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.